Great. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Abe and CKA for hosting this event in honor of International Women's Day. And it is so exciting for me to be moderating this panel with Sylvia Kim, Hannah Song, and Miss Jieun Park. These are, Korean women born in Canada and the United States and North Korea, all driven by a shared mission, which is, they'll share more about that. But I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to highlight some of the successful people in our world who are able to balance so many things, all the while remaining guided by a life goal and mission. And so I know everyone in this audience has access to their very prolific bios, and so I thought I would have the panelists introduce themselves in their own words and share with us a bit about what kind of work they do. And so Sylvia, can I start with you? Can you share with us what city you're in, what you do, and tell us a bit about yourself?
Absolutely, and thank you so much to CKA for this incredible panel and Jihyun for inviting me to speak alongside of such incredible women. Truly an honor to spend my International Women's Rights Day like this. So currently I'm in Irvine, California, originally from Toronto, Canada, so I'm the Canadian. And I guess a little bit about what I'm doing right now. So I'm a human rights lawyer turned VC. I think most people in CKA probably know me more as the human rights lawyer and as more of a nonprofit advocate. But after 15 years of kind of frontline advocacy work, I recently pivoted into the world of VC, mostly because I felt that I could make more of a sustainable impact at the intersection of tech, innovation, and access to capital. So in my current role, I'm the general partner of Sarah Capp Cares, which is a women-led impact fund, and we invest in early stage technologies that aim to reduce disparities and unleash the power of technology for good.
Thank you. And I'll go over to you, Miss Park. Thank you so much for joining us from the UK. I know it's past midnight where you are. So can you introduce yourself in your words and tell us a bit about what kind of work you do now?
Oh, thank you. First, I say Happy International Women's Day all over the world. Yeah, I'm really excited this event. So I escaped to North Korea twice, and I arrived in the UK 2008. And now I am human rights activist because the women's rights are a critical indicator of where countries' human rights stands. So through my work, I met many NGOs and human rights activists. They all agree that North Korea is the #1 abuser of human rights in the world. Strangely, Raleigh addressed all the abuse and the human rights violations of North Korean women and girls. The abuse of human rights in North Korea caused by a brutal dictatorship has been known for a long time. However, in North Korea, women experience far more discrimination in society and family life than men. This is not spoken about. The strong patriarchal aspects of North Korean society continued to affect women despite a socialist regime that claims to pursue gender equality. The North Korean regime has the worst record on human rights abuses. This is in turn leads to criminally high levels of human trafficking as women escape in a large number than men. Women who are caught while escaping are possibly repatriated to North Korea and are tortured at the hands of the government. I too am a survivor. I too am a witness of the human trafficking trade. Human trafficking is a place that fills me with disgrace, humiliations, and painful memories. I wanted to hide these memories and bury them in my heart. However, until a few years ago, I never could have imagined myself being a North Korean women's human rights activist. Now I am also an anti-trafficking activist. So why do I want to speak about North Korean women? Because North Korean women deserve the same rights as from other countries, and I wanted to protect to them this. I know that if I do not do this, if I do not speak out, many stories will be left untold, and even worse, stories about the women who disappeared for good. So that's why I became human rights activist. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Park. For those who may not know, Ms. Park is, among many things, a human rights activist for North Korean women and North Korean children, also the children born to North Korean women in China. She's also a conservative candidate in local elections in her new hometown in the UK. And she's also the author of the book, Two Koreas in French. And so I believe the English translation is forthcoming. And so those of you in the audience who read French, please pick up a copy of Ms. Park's story. And so Hannah, I'll go over to you now. Can you tell us a bit about what you do? I know a lot of people know you, and to tell us what you do and how you came to do this line of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jieun, for inviting me, CKA. It's really an honor to spend my International Women's Day, although it'll be a month that we'll be celebrating and much more, but really honored and grateful to be here speaking alongside all of you, just such incredible women. I'm born in the Midwest in Michigan, and actually I was raised on the East Coast, and now I'm in Southern California. So I actually started off my career in television production in college and then graduated and worked in advertising. I did digital media, emerging technologies, and I really loved my job, but I actually decided to jump ship when I had this sort of aha moment, and I ended up in the nonprofit world. So I've been working with Liberty in North Korea now for about 15 years and just feel incredibly privileged to be able to do this work every day. Link, for many of you who may not know our organization or what we do, we really focus on, we like to call ourselves a global movement that works with the North Korean people to achieve their freedom. And so, in other words, we help North Korean refugees escape through a sort of modern day underground railroad. So 3,000 miles of secret rescue routes to safety and freedom. We also work to build the capacity of North Korean defectors as storytellers and advocates and agents of change on this issue. We also experiment and research and work on strategies that will get more information, resources, and technology into the hands of the North Korean people inside the country and pursue initiatives that will ultimately help to accelerate change in North Korea. So that's kind of the main work that Liberty in North Korea does.
Thank you. And Hannah, for those who want to learn more about what Link does, as well as the stories that North Korean escapees tell, where can they learn more about that?
The best place is our website, libertyinnorthkorea.org, or we're also on pretty much every social media platform minus TikTok. So you can definitely find us anywhere. And we, would love to connect with you. We have a lot of stories of the work we're doing and also of the North Korean people that we get to work with.
Thank you. So I'll stay with you, Hannah, for a little bit. So obviously the organization is a very, it's a mission-driven organization, but I want to take it a little bit more on a personal level. How did you, what's the life mission, what's the goal, what's the mission that drives you to do this extremely important, but also extremely challenging work?
Yeah, I think, I have always sort of had a passion for social justice and human rights issues. I think for me, I had always sort of done those things on the side. And what happened was actually after college, I read this book about North Korea. It was about a North Korean man who ended up in one of the most brutal political prison camps in North Korea called Yodok. And he ended up there when he was 9 years old with his parents and his grandmother. So, North Korea has a 3-generation punishment policy. And, this boy was 9 years old when he went into this political prison camp. And what he described over the course of this book was just unbelievable, brutal, the types of things that Ms. Park has experienced and has also shared in her story. I think for me, it was shocking, and it really drove me to have this sort of a realization. For me, I realized then that if I would have the privilege and the opportunity to do this work, that I would be so committed to doing it for two reasons. One, it's unbelievable that a place like North Korea exists in modern day. I think when you think about how isolated and closed it is, the fact that about 1 million people could starve to death in this country, and most of the world wouldn't know this in the late 90s, and frankly wouldn't really pay that much attention to it. The fact that, like Ms. Park mentioned, thousands of North Korean women have been trafficked and forcibly sold as brides in China, and the fact that that isn't a more prominent issue. The fact that you have 25 million North Korean people isolated from the rest of the world. They don't have access to information about the outside world. They don't really know what's going on beyond what their government tells them. And the fact that there are political prison camps that are reminiscent of the Soviet gulags and Nazi concentration camps. How could this exist in modern day? So I think for me, that was one really big driving factor that I think it's abhorrent that a place like this exists today, and that I wanted to do anything that I could to work on this issue and to help the North Korean people achieve their freedom. And then there's a personal side. My grandmother is from North Korea. It never really meant much growing up, to be honest, because she never talked about her life. And I didn't understand why, but much later on, we found out that she actually had a husband and 2 children she left there and had never been able to go back to see. And I realized that this story is only just representative of so many thousands of other Koreans, Korean Americans, Korean diaspora, North Koreans who have had the same pain and have dealt with that pain of being separated from their families. And this has happened for decades now. And so for me, I think it's really those 2 reasons that have driven me to consider this work to be a huge privilege to really commit my life to.
Hannah, the book that you're talking about, by any chance, was that titled Aquariums of Pyongyang by Mr.
Yes.
Kang Chul-hwan?
That's right.
So those in the audience, if you're interested in picking up a copy, please do so. It's called Aquariums of Pyongyang by Mr. Kang Chul-hwan. It's also the book that changed my life and got me interested in North Korea work. That's the book that helped me decide to not go to medical school and pursue this line of work. And so I didn't know that, Hannah, but thank you for sharing that. Sylvia, I want to go to you. You've had such a successful, colorful, and also diverse career. And it seems like the through line that connects your career from advocacy to activism to law to VC has to do with your interest in something about North Korea. Can you share with us what's the mission that's driving your work in your career?
Thank you. I mean, again, this is such an honor, just even hearing all the different themes. I mean, just to quickly tie up another loose end, I mean, Mrs. Park, when I went to Oxford, actually for my master's in law, I got connected to the European Alliance for Human Rights. And they were asking me if I would be interested in writing a paper about trafficked women. And so actually, if people want to learn more about Mrs. Park's story, and I actually co-wrote it with her son, who grew up as a stateless child in North Korea, or in northern China. It's actually called Invisible Children, the Stateless Children of North Korea. So, I mean, it's just been incredible to kind of see the full circle. But going back to your question, I definitely have had a very colorful, varied career, I would say. And, I've actually worked across multiple different causes. I started with Indigenous rights in rural Canada, did criminal law in Canada, worked in Asian American civil rights, but absolutely, I think North Korean human rights has been something that's been so close to my heart, mostly because of just everything Hannah so beautifully articulated, understanding my heritage, my ethnic background. Both sides of my family are originally from North Korea, and just kind of understanding that if me as a Korean ethnic person, even though I was born and raised in Canada, could not be a voice for the voiceless, then who would be? And I know, I thank organizations like Link that have really kind of allowed this issue to become much more mainstream. And, you know, there's so many now non-Koreans who have come alongside of this issue. But I would say that even more broader than the North Korean human rights issue, I think what's really driven me has been the empowerment of the underserved, because I realized that it's not just about the advocacy work and the frontline work, you know, which has been incredibly rewarding, but also exhausting at times. I think for me, it's been about how can we have kind of the biggest bang for a buck, right? Like, you know, I think I realized as I started popping out babies that, you know, like 100 hours a week wasn't going to cut it, you know, not at the nonprofit salary, you know. And so I think for me, it was kind of finding different ways to approach my work, to innovate, even though sometimes that's really challenging when you're used to being an expert in something. And also for me, struggling with getting rid of kind of this mindset of scarcity, which I found to be very common in the world of nonprofit. I think it's just the way the funding structure is. And I think once I started going up the ranks of nonprofits and understanding that fundamentally, as we all know, you know, if you're a nonprofit director, you're fundraising, you're in fund development, and it's a year in, year out job. I think I started realizing that, you know what, there is so much capital in this world, and why am I stuck in this like mindset of scarcity and fighting for breadcrumbs? I think that was fundamentally what kind of pushed me more into the for-profit world. And now, having seen the abundance of ideas, talent, and just the incredible amount of capital that exists on the other side, you know, I think it's become more of my mission now on how do we unlock that kind of capital for the underserved and the underrepresented, for people like Mrs. Park, who are the face of, you know, women and who are advocating in places like the UN, in her local hometown. And so that's become kind of my mission. So I think sometimes it's kind of changed in terms of different causes, but I would say that fundamentally it's been, you know, how can we sustainably empower the underserved?
For those in the audience, you know, if you are someone who can help unlock some capital for these issues that we're talking about, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. Ms. Park, I want to go to you. You know, you've had such an incredibly, you know, you've just faced so many challenges personally, and now you're in the UK as an activist as well as a political candidate in the UK. How did you decide to run for office for local elections?
Yeah, that is because in here in the UK, 13 years ago, I arrived in the UK, and the first time, you know, I never heard about that is what is the human rights, what is the women's rights, and what means politics. I didn't know that, because the first big problem was that is language, because I didn't know any language, any English when I came to the UK. So that is a really difficult moment for us. And I never heard that it means parties, because North Korea is only one party, and the people not joined this party freely. But in here, they have got different parties. And the first time when I watched the Parliament TV, and I really shocked because MPs always shouted, you know, in a room. They always shouted. So I didn't understand why they fight each other, because they are not enemies each other, you know. So that is really surprised for me. But then I started my human rights works. But the first time I thought that maybe I start speak out these human rights issues. That is, I thought that is always without the politics, but we don't know that is politics, and we cannot work about these issues. So then I helped many North Korean refugees who lives in the UK, and also speak about the North Korea human rights issues. Then in 2020, in the last year, you know, that is not only UK, all over the world, it was darkness, yes, you know. So I every day sat down on my sofa, and I heard that today how many people died about this COVID-19. So that is really painful to me, and I back to my life in 1990s. because at that time is, the many people died of stabbings, and we usually seen dead bodies in street. And my uncle also died in front of me, and the family separated, and they didn't know where their family members. So that is really painful to me. And also, I escaped to North Korea first time. I abandoned my illness father because my father's last wish was to save my younger brother. So I left my illness father alone in cold dining room, and we escaped to North Korea. But once in China, I also separated my younger brother, and we separated. And in 2004, I also separated my 5-year-old child because he's alone in China, and I repatriated to North Korea. So last year, the same many people, they separated each others, and they cannot meet and cannot see. That is really painful. So united is really important source of strength. So that is why I survived here and united my son again. So last year I talked about that is maybe someone needs our help, because when I came to the UK, all UK people helped to us. They're teaching to me English, and they hug to us and welcome to us, and they give to us opportunity, challenges, happiness, freedoms, all life in here. So I now is pay back to this happiness to another voiceless people. So that's why I stand up this politics. But that is not politics. That is community leaders. That's works. Yes, so that's why I do. Yeah.
That's remarkable. So you want to pay forward the goodness that your new country men and women have shown to you and your family by contributing through politics as a community leader. In addition to a lot of the highs, there must be some challenges, just difficulties that you face in your work as a political candidate, but also as a human rights activist. Where do you find encouragement and strength to keep on going when you're facing tough times in your career, Ms. Park?
Yeah, I left North Korea. I already lost my families, my friends, my dreams, everything. Evils took out, but they never killed my spirits, and they never killed my smiles. So that is give me challenge, because it's I am personal witness, and I am is a speaker person. So I wanted to that is a big challenge, because many women now hide their voices and hide their faces, and they not speak out their problems. So that is we now is usually speak out that we equal human rights, but someone can't speak because they're nervous and they didn't know what they speak or public or something like that. So my most is a challenge, or my most strength, that is a strong fighter, in front of the evils or something. So that is give me challenge, more strength in nowadays.
That's awesome. I think growing up, I just heard that the strongest type of person is a Korean woman. And whether you're born in the US or South Korea or North Korea or Canada or elsewhere, I feel like that's definitely something that rings true for all of us. Hannah, in your 15 years of working as the CEO and the president of Liberty North Korea, you must have faced all sorts of challenges, and especially personal as well as organizational. How do you keep on going, and where do you find that strength? Where do you derive that strength from?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely an important question for those of us who work on this issue, because it is such a challenging issue. I think for me, my strength is really derived from my faith. It's also derived from my community. I have an incredible community just of friends, my family. I have an unbelievable staff and team that I get to work with, even just an amazing board that fully supports who we are, what we do, my executive leadership team. So I just feel very fortunate to be surrounded by people who believe wholeheartedly in our mission and what we're doing, and also just in me. That's something that that can't go understated, because I think that there are so many challenges that we do face in doing this work. And that every step of the way, there are always going to be things that I could probably be doing better. But just to have the support of this community around me and that encouragement has been what's helped to sustain me over 15 years. And I would say also, for me, I think there's also a sense of responsibility and privilege. I'm incredibly grateful for the sacrifices of people who have come before me, not only my grandmother, who sacrificed everything, left North Korea, ended up in South Korea, and somehow in the US. And because of that, I was born here in America. I think about the sacrifices of my parents who, couldn't be who they could have been had they have stayed in South Korea, but instead came here to the US and made a ton of sacrifices so that me and my brothers could essentially just be the people that we are today, to be able to pursue and to fulfill our potential. And I think about just the opportunity that I have because of the fact that there have been so many people that have entrusted me, so many of our North Korean friends that have just shared their stories. And like Ms. Park said, they don't have the ability to speak out for themselves because they still have family inside, or because there have been so many difficult things that have happened to them that it would be too painful to be able to talk about their stories. And so just the fact that, so many of our North Korean friends have shared these things and have entrusted me with those stories. And the fact that I have an opportunity to go out and to really, on their behalf, hopefully share those stories and to make sure that North Korea, this issue deserves, that it gets the attention and the resources that it deserves.
And Sylvia, over to you. In your current work in VC or in venture capital, as well as the other strands of work that continue on, even though you're full-time in VC, I know you wear many hats as an advocate, a lifelong advocate. What kind of challenges do you face in your work, especially personally, and where do you derive your strength from?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think right now, definitely the challenge I'm facing, and I've written a little bit about this, is that I just made like a very major career pivot. So it's really strange somehow to like go from something that's become so familiar, like having done it for over 10, 15 years, knowing all of the same network, and then kind of starting from the bottom. But I felt very driven, I think, by my why, and by really feeling that I needed the work that I was doing to be much closer to the capital I knew that existed, and to that intersection of kind of tech, innovation. And if I'm very honest, and I think we've kind of slightly touched upon it, is that people who are on the front line, man, burnout is a real challenge. I mean, people like Hyun, I bow down, like leading an organization like Link, it's just incredible work. And same with Mrs. Park, to advocate in and out, and then now to think about giving that forward. The burnout is real. I think that for those of us like myself, who was born and raised in a more privileged setting, I also think that some of the challenges, this like savior mentality. And I think at one point, I came to a point where I was like, oh my God, like this can't survive without me. And it's so presumptuous, and it's so arrogant of me to think that a movement will die because of just one individual. And so I think it's almost been like eating a little bit of humble pie, and understanding that the pursuit of justice is collective. I think the pursuit of any grand vision that's going to make a difference in history is collective. And it's a true honor and privilege to even play a small role in that, whatever role your role may be. And a recent realization of me was that, I had been so driven by advocacy and just a lot of my nonprofit work, that one of the things that I put on the back burner were some of my personal relationships, including my kids and my husband. And one of the big mantras that I've had, as I pivoted, was just this sense that, whatever is driving me externally has to also give me peace and self-empowerment, because ultimately it's empowered people who empower others. You know, if you're burnt out and you're, you know, challenged every day and getting your stuff done, then you're not going to empower anyone else. And so I think that for me, those are some of the challenges that I faced. I feel like I'm learning every day, but I feel very privileged that I get to be in rooms now where, you know, I know nothing, but I'm learning so much. My world has broadened incredibly. And I really feel that, you know, I feel like a secret spy sometimes, because I'm always like, well, what about the underserved, or what about the underrepresented? How do we unlock the capital? Show me the secrets, you know? Like, I feel like it's this whole other world, and, you know, but it is, you know, 1 million for a nonprofit is a huge success. 1 million is just a deal in the world of VC. It's a small deal. And I think that we have to change some of that perception, change some of those mindsets. And how do we really raise, I think, the work of nonprofit leaders and the work of community leaders and the incredible advocacy work that's taking place, and how can we place it at the same value as these $1 million+ deals that happen transactionally like 100 times a day. So anyways, so those are just some of the things that I guess have been that I've been grappling with.
Certainly. For all the audience members, I'm going to ask one more question to the panel, and then I'll turn it over to Q&A. And so if you have questions, since we have a sizable audience, please feel free to text or type your question into the chat, and we'll go from there. You're already getting fan mail, Ms. Park, Sylvia, and Hannah, and so I'll read those out. But before I go to the last question, so just to summarize what has been said so far in terms of what drives you, but also where you get your strength from in your mission-driven careers. A couple of things I've just jotted down here. The idea of paying it forward as a means of paying it back to the people who came before us. A sense of moral duty, responsibility, asking yourself, my why, what is my why? Why am I here? What can I do to make a difference? And what I heard also was the arbitrariness of birthplace. You know, some people were arbitrarily born in North Korea, like Ms. Park. Myself, Hannah, and Sylvia were born in some of the freest countries, if not the freest countries in the world, the US and Canada. And so how can we use the privileges that we are just born with to serve people who are born in places like North Korea and elsewhere? And also the idea, I can't really read my writing here, being the voice of the voiceless. And also, Sylvia, you pointed to something I think all women and men, but especially women and mothers, I am not one, but I know the three of you are, ought to hear more often, which is that the importance of self-care, that empowered people can empower others. And so these are some things I think are really practical tips that we can take away. But my last question to you before I turn it over to the audience is, what practical tips or advice would you three leaders share with others in the group who are interested in integrating more of their passions and mission into their careers? I know, in this group, I was looking at the RSVP list, and there are some young women and men in this group, but also people who are interested in pursuing second, if not third, career changes. And so what kind of practical advice would you give to folks in this group? I'll move over to Hannah.
This is always a question that I get, and it's so tough because I think everybody comes from very different circumstances and situations. I think if I can just speak to my own situation, I heard this quote. This was by Brian Stevenson. Many of you probably know him. Honestly, one of the most inspiring modern day human rights activists. But he talks about how a lot of people have this idea of wanting to change the world or going and changing this issue and doing these different things. And, he talks about how you can't, you don't change the world with the ideas that you have in your head, but the convictions in your heart. And I think that that's so true. When I think about when I was in corporate and I was really struggling back and forth between whether I jump ship and go, to work full time on this work, I think at the end of the day, a lot of it for me just came back to, what were my convictions, what was important to me, and really my own identity. And so my old pastor used to always say, who you are what you do doesn't determine who you are, but who you are should determine what you do. And I think that when I had a strong sense of my own identity and who I was and what I believed in, the things that were important to me, I just had to force myself to let go and to really just be true to those convictions, and to know that this is something that I would go out and do. But also I have to say that, to be realistic, at that time I was in my early mid-20s. And so it was a much lower risk threshold for me too. And in the back of my mind, I had a backup plan, and I said, corporate's not going anywhere. I can jump ship now and go do this. And if all else fails, I can always try to crawl back and into corporate and get my job back. But I know it's a different risk calculation for every person, and that's what's challenging. But I do think that what's undeniable sometimes is it's hard to be true to ourselves if we're not being true to what's in our hearts and what we believe in.
Sylvia, I want to turn to you, but ask a slightly different question based on a question that came in from Jimmy Lee, who's also one of the organizers for this event. So what advice would you give to people who are at a crossroads between choosing something that's more mission-driven, perhaps more risky, and a career that's more financially secure? And given that we are, most of us are with kind of grown up in families that may be more conservative, the older generation may be conservative. How do you talk to your families about such choices?
Man, my dad still calls me 변호사. Like, he's just like, even though I haven't practiced law for like over a decade, in his mind, his daughter is forever 검사 and 변호사. So I mean, it's definitely, I think, challenging in a Korean family context. And I feel like I've kind of gone to one side of the pendulum and kind of am slowly swinging back. So I would say, as Hannah said, it's such a individual, it's so based on individual circumstances. But I do want to encourage people that, having been practicing kind of nonprofit work full time for over a decade, that's not the only way to have a mission-driven life, right? Like, I think that there has to be more integration between life and career. And I think that we need more mission-driven investors. We need more mission-driven doctors and lawyers and professionals in the finance world. What we need actually is more integration. And so, like, maybe the question is not necessarily about giving up your financially secure job and taking out a loan, but it might be about, how can I contribute to existing organizations and amplify their work? And, financial donations seem so unsexy, but really that is what keeps the light on. That is what rescues refugees. That is what fuels Mrs. Park's campaign. That is what allows information to go into North Korea. So I think I'm maybe aged now and a little bit more jaded, but I think in my world, like, man, I regret now that I rejected my corporate law job. Maybe I should have gone in there and become like a crazy donor. But every life and career has different seasons. So I think it's about kind of understanding what season you're in. And some people have obligation and responsibilities that you just cannot deny. And as I said earlier, you have to be self-empowered yourself, right? So if you're going into debt and feeling dejected and depressed and burnt out, then it's probably not the best life choice. But I think that if this is something that can amplify and uplift and gives you energy and energizes you, then I think that, those are self-questions that we have to kind of understand for ourselves. But all to say that I don't think it's necessarily a or question. It could be an and question. And really thinking about all the unsexy ways to help drive mission-driven organizations, because we need a lot more of that.
Could I just amplify what Sylvia is saying here? Because we have an absolutely incredible board, and I am so grateful to the people that serve on our board and serve alongside us. And everyone on our board is so mission driven. They are there because they believe in it. And we have amazing people that have totally incredible, accomplished backgrounds. And we wouldn't be able to have the impact we have if we didn't have a board at that caliber. And we have folks on there, even people that are part of CKA, including I think Gloria Lee on here too that serves, but we're so incredibly grateful, and people I think who are within different careers and industries and backgrounds can truly come and amplify an organization and really level up, help that organization level up in a very different way that would be so much more meaningful than actually going and joining the organization in sort of a full-time capacity. So I agree wholeheartedly, and I appreciate what you're saying, Sylvia. That's a great point.
And to the panelists, feel free to jump in and keep it more conversational. So I'm just going to jump straight into the questions. We have a lot of questions coming in through the chat, also my WhatsApp and emails. There's a lot going on here. So I'll try to stay organized. I'll go to a question that Dr. Ki Park has asked this panel. What are some things, and I'll just sort of direct the questions to us. What are some things that men can do, that men and sons and brothers can do to support women, especially in these careers? And is there anything that's unique to Korean culture? Ms. Park, would you be interested in addressing that question? What can men do to support women in their careers?
When I started in my work in 2012, so when I shared my story to world, but that is really sharing the stories, because also painful stories. When I speak my story, that is my family members, and also I have to speak my human trafficking issues. I have to do that. But it's personally, I also the women, and I have children, and I have a husband. So first time I really ashamed. So first time I shared my stories, I hide my face, and I also hide my names. But one day my husband told me that if you hide your face or your names, you can't do this work, because you are truly survivor and witness. No one deprived about your lives. So if someone stands for you, I just is in front of you. So you have to speak about your work. So man have to believe the woman's voice and listen to the carefully, because women is everywhere. We are, it's the big everywhere. Is the have about the violence and all these victims, but women is usually weakness and voiceless. The reasons that is still this country's patriarchal aspects in every ways. So we each other believes, men and women is together. That is really important, and you have to support that is women's work. You just is a craft to us work. So that's what that is. Many women stand up in front of us.
Thank you, Ms. Park. For those who may learn more about her story through her book and her articles and interviews, her husband, who's also in the UK with her, is a truly remarkable advocate for her and her career, also a phenomenal cook. But just so, yeah, he is the one who encouraged her to be on the record with her story, given the quote unquote shameful, put that in air quotes, stories that the Korean culture may not be so receptive to. And so that's really remarkable. I want to go to another question about trade-offs, and perhaps I can go to Sylvia with this one. Can you talk a bit about trade-offs you had to wrestle with? What helped you pursue your career choices? So trade-offs, maybe perhaps.
Yeah, sorry, I'm still like moved from Mrs. Park's sharing. I think I saw all three of us being like, yeah, just so wonderful, Mrs. Park. In terms of trade-offs, like again, I think it comes in different seasons. Like I'll be honest that definitely in my 20s, I wanted to like die for the cause. Like I was like, you don't need money, you don't need anything. Like, and I think even people who know me now would say that I've changed quite a bit from my 20s. I think that part of the trade-off is that, I am still very Korean. I married a Korean American. I had babies really young. Like, don't do that if you're going to give up everything. I popped them out super early. Like, I think people from Han Voice days know that when we started Han Voice, it was a Canadian human rights organization for North Korean refugees. They had no money. So when I got married, I did a 2-for-1 deal at my wedding venue so that they could host an international conference. And every guest at my wedding didn't get a gift. They got a donation on their behalf. So I definitely probably was very radical in my 20s. And similar to Mrs. Park, I married really, truly, a really good man that helped me balance some of the trade-offs. So, my husband, when I met him, he was actually a pastor. And after he experienced my Han Voice advocacy days, he went to law school and became a corporate lawyer. So I think he realized that someone had to pay the bills. And I mean, unfortunate, but I think that's some of the practical considerations that you have to think about, right? Because, you know, we had 2 kids at that point. You know, we have to pay the bills. One big trade-off that I know we didn't quite touch on this panel is about the time you spend with your children. And, you know, I think I've written about this very recently, but, you know, when you're an advocate, there's so many external meetings and things that suck your energy externally, that what I found was this constant tension with how much time I was spending with my kids. And there's this real pivotal moment that I wrote about recently, that where my 5-year-old son at the time, like, turned to me and was like, "Mommy, do you love your work more than you love me?" And it was like I just, the pain of that, like, I know I've shared this on different platforms, but it's seared my mind. And I think it really showed me that it doesn't matter how mission driven I am. It doesn't matter what I'm leading. If my own child can't feel that I'm there for him and that I love him the most. And I think that's kind of been the evolution of my why and my mission. And, you know, my perspective now is that, you know, maybe as you get older, that's why you become more conservative. I don't know what it is, but the reality is that your obligations grow, especially if you choose to have children. And so I think that there are some real practical considerations that you do have to take into mind. So sorry, that was long-winded, but.
On the note of parents, I'm getting a couple questions here about what can, and this is a question open to the full panel, what advice do you have for parents to raise strong, courageous, and driven young girls and women? Ms. Park?
Yeah. It's I have a daughter. Now is 12 years old. So she's a lot of dreams and talk too much for me. So that's why I usually learn that it's a K-pop, the singers or K-dramas. Everything I learn. So sometimes I really headache. So I denied some questions, but sometimes she asked me about that. Because we are Korean, and in our home, we usually speak our languages, because my children is the same, because the mother language is important to us. And also, same is my North Korean defectors, the refugee and the immigrant. They all, that is really important, their mother languages. So when me and my husband is talked about something that, but me and my husband is really strong accents. That is not South Korea accents, Hamgyong province, that is accents, so different. So sometimes we call it people, that is the color. So, that is we are Asian people or American people, African people, it's lots of different. But sometimes we call it black people or something that. Then my daughter told to us, don't say color, because they are same as us, because my friend. So that is really touched to me, because that is usually parents speaks not carefully. They speak sometimes bad language or politics and they shout something that, but that is big problems. With the children, we speak carefully. And if we are parents, but we don't know something that, because the children is growing up, and now is technology and more information that come out, but we don't get everything. But sometimes the children get another information, so they also teaching to us. So we can teach listen to the children's voice too, and also parents teaching to them life, but we don't push it to them. We don't push it to them, because they have got the choice. We do is the protect and respect their choices. So I have two sons and a girl, but it's different topics we talked about that. Because man is usually asked those different, politics or arts or something. That's, but girl is different. It's friendly, lovely, different. That's so we have to, as parents, also carefully listen to the children. So that is, I don't know that is the answer, but it's That is my parents, this mother. Yeah.
Absolutely. So keep the dialogue open between parents and the children, not a one-way conversation or one-way series of speeches, but keep the dialogue open and listen to your girls. Hannah?
I was going to say, actually, also, I think it makes such a difference. My child is too young for me to see this yet. So, but I think just from my experience, I think the role that fathers can play is so important, because how they treat their wives, how your husbands treat you, especially in front of the children. And I think the way they support us and the way they encourage us and empower us is also something that I think the children will see. And while I don't know that specifically with my own children yet, I do know that my husband is just an incredible partner. I wouldn't be able to do this work without him on so many levels. But I do know that when we talk about sort of, where does that come from for him? He shares a lot about sort of how he saw the way his father treated his mother and the way that he respected her and really pushed the boys in his family to really respect the mom and to really appreciate her. And I think that really set an example for him to be who he is today. And so I do think that also plays a huge role as well.
And if I could just quickly add to that, sorry, this daughter thing, I'm also raising a daughter, and I do want to acknowledge that if, we're, especially as Korean ethnic people, there is definitely systemic patriarchal cultural aspects to the Korean culture. And so I do just want to acknowledge and my hope and prayer is that in this next generation of women, I mean, I was very blessed to be raised by a father who allowed me to fully be me. And as Hannah mentioned, and I was always told that I was like the boy, the son, which probably didn't help. But I think that I'm really hoping that with this next generation of women that we're raising, that we really allow them to fully not have to hide their voice and who they are. An example of that is, recently my mother-in-law was diagnosed with lung cancer. So my 6-year-old daughter and myself, we shaved our heads. Again, very, anti-cultural, like non-traditional, but I think even for my daughter to understand that and then go to her Zoom class and do a big reveal and understand that beauty has nothing to do with her hair, and that actually her conviction to support her grandma was so much more powerful, I think, than what society tells her is beautiful. I think it's just such a powerful countercultural way. And, I really hope and pray that, for her, she likes to wear boys' clothes, like she's almost 8 now. I know, even all those gender issues is very touchy in the Korean community. And I am not defining it for her. I'm not imposing it for her. For me, it's about, you fully be you, how you were designed to be, whatever makes you feel comfortable and happy and joyful and run around with joy. And I feel like my job as a parent is to cultivate that and to really nourish that, even though it may be countercultural or not as familiar to what I grew up with.
On that note, Sylvia, what can the Korean community do? The Korean American community, or just the Korean community at large, do to better support and uplift women leaders around the world? Sylvia?
Sorry. Yeah, no, I think that I have some opinions about this. Like, I think that for me, I hope I'm not too controversial, and please, Hannah and Mrs. Park, jump in. I think the way I see it is that the immigration history in America or the US is still quite short. I mean, in Canada, it's even shorter. It's not quite as long as other ethnic groups. And so I think that there's still the strong, very first generation influence. So my hope for the Korean American community is that, as I mentioned with even my daughter, is that we're able to kind of shed some of that patriarchal thinking. I don't think it's just a Korean thing. I've worked in very large Asian American organizations. I think it's actually an Asian American thing where, whether it's the model minority myth or, our submissive Confucianism confused with, not a clear Asian American identity, we often, I think, take on, like I see this actually a lot, for example, in Korean churches. Like if you look at Korean churches, like they basically model the white church, very Presbyterian. Everything is like very ritualistic, almost like they just imitate almost white dominant culture, except when we pray. And then that's the only time when like Korean passion comes out. And so I think for me, like, I feel like the Korean American identity is still formative. And I think that there's still a lot more that can be done to support women leaders, especially women leaders that are unconventional. And my hope is that, you know, as the community grows, as, you know, third generation, fourth generation, LGBTQ generation, you know, all kinds of different identities emerge, that we're able to truly embrace that and give a place for that. But I think as it stands right now, I struggle. Sometimes I struggle because I feel like the organizations in the community are just modeling the dominant white community.
If I could also say though, that I really appreciate CKA for hosting this event. And I think that there are also other groups that host similar types of events. And I think it's important also to be able to provide a platform to women leaders and to be able to also provide access. I know for myself, when I was growing up, there weren't a lot of opportunities like this that I knew of where I would be able to hear from a lot of Korean American female leaders and CEOs and other you know, women that I could look to, or even I wouldn't even know how to have access to them. And I think more recently, there are just great organizations that have started to pop up, like CKA and NetCal and other you know, Korean groups, specifically here in the US, obviously Korean American types of groups, lots of them, and organizations. And I'm really grateful for that, because the more we can have these types of opportunities to connect with other female leaders, I'm sure there are so many other people here today that should probably be on this panel as well, talking about their incredible mission-driven careers and how they've gotten there. So I appreciate CKA for hosting this, and think that when there's an opportunity for us to have more of these types of events to connect with other women and even for other men too, to sit in and to listen and to be allies and support and to share their opinions too, I think that's so invaluable.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm going to squeeze in one more question. It's going to be a big question before I hand it over to Abe to close out the event, and I'll go to Ms. Park first. How has being your identity as a woman served as a strength in your role as a change maker, as a CEO, as an activist? How has being a woman served as a strength for you? Ms. Park?
Yeah, you know, I was weakness and voiceless person until the 2012. You know, I never thought that my son changed for me and pushed to me your speak about your stories in our world. But he did, you know, in 2012, when he was 12 years old, and he asked me kind of painful questions. He asked me that is, Mommy, why did you abandon me and leave me? Because this question is 5 years old child memories. You know, that when he was 5, I repatriated to North Korea and separated my son. He's alone in China, and I back to North Korea. So 5 years old child didn't understand, because it's nighttime, 10 Chinese authorities came to my home, and they asked my mother, but my mother didn't say to him goodbye or wait me. So any word, I didn't say that because the police didn't allow to me. So when I heard these questions, I just cried, because how did I explain my life to my son? I cannot. So, and this question also told me that you are not only victims, you are not only is a painful person. You can see around the world next to yours. So I just is back to head, and I see next to me who is painful stories they got. That is my son. That's my son, you know. But I didn't know until that days, my son's painful stories. So then after I started to speak out about my stories, and then every night I had a nightmare, you know, I've seen my illness father came to my dreams, and also my younger brother came to me, and sometimes I work in labor camp, in the North Korea prison camp. And then I woke up. I really scared, but that is only dreams, not my entire now life. But it's 25 million people, North Korean females, North Korean people, all people, they have now, this is a real life in North Korea. So my big challenge is, there is in 2018, I think so 2018, one day, it's midnight, my colleague contacted me directly because it's urgent. It's someone now is arrested in Chinese police. So we have to save these people. So then I just find out so many my contact and we underground the work. Then we saved these people. And after they arrived in South Korea, so one day someone face called to me because this person, she already arrived in South Korea and then she contacted me. Thank you for me. So that time is, I thought that is save one person is to save the world. So that is my, how do I say, it's strong, that is actions because, that I already tasted someone happiness, real happiness. So that's why it's, I don't know how to explain it, but this give me more powerful, and then I just is a strong work and fight again in standing here.
Thank you, Ms. Park. I think you, everyone understood very clearly what you were saying, that you used your unspeakable pain that you've experienced as a source of endless empathy and a source of power to be the voice for the voiceless. And so thank you so much for sharing that. I know we're a little bit over, and so I do want to have Hannah and Sylvia quickly answer this huge question. How did being a woman serve as a strength for you in your careers? And then we'll hand it back to Abe. Hannah?
So if I'm being very honest, I don't know if I can say that it served as a strength. I think it's funny because the things that come to mind are actually, the challenges of being a woman, for example, in this role or in this work in particular, or in Korean American or in Korea when I go there and do work. I do think though that obviously I love being a woman. I don't know what it's like to be a man, but I feel fortunate that to be a woman and to be in a position that I'm in and to have had these opportunities, I'm grateful that I can understand that experience and to hopefully just be able to do whatever I can to lift up other women that don't have the same opportunities, to try to do whatever I can to create a better pathway, a better future for other women that will come after me. And so I don't know if I could answer and say that there are strengths, unfortunately, but maybe I just have to think about that a little bit more. But I think overall, just grateful to be a woman, and in this time in particular, where we do get to be able to share and to lead and to be able to speak to these types of issues. And I think that for me, it's more just, I'm grateful to be around people who I don't think see me as a female leader or even a female woman of color leader, but actually just as a leader, just as a CEO. And I think that's also really important for me too.
Absolutely. Sylvia?
Very quickly, I think similar to Hannah, until I became a VC, actually, I can only think of all these negative experiences, whether it's in law. I was a criminal litigator, always mistaken for being one of the administrative staff, especially at 5'1", and, just all these kind of barriers, I guess, or always being the only woman in the room. But I will say that for the first time in my life, and this just happens to be, I think, total serendipity and just all of this research that has come out, apparently women fund managers perform much better than male fund managers. And that's, I think, supported by like a recent Goldman Sachs. And so I think, funnily enough, my current impact fund, we are totally marketing it as like a 100% woman-led impact fund with 100% advisory council of women, 100% women founders so far. And so it's been fascinating to see that kind of advantage, I guess, because the market forces have gone that way to prove that women actually are better at managing large funds. But, excited to kind of further embrace and, play up to that role and advantage in my current role.
Thank you, Sylvia, Hannah, and Ms. Park for sharing with us such honest and very personal experiences about your guys' mission-driven careers.